The Galactic Council station floated in the center of the system like a shining crown. Around it, thousands of lights burned in the darkness of space. Warships from many alien empires stood in formation. The largest fleet belonged to the Zyron Empire. Their ships were tall, sharp, and perfect. Their metal hulls were smooth like glass. Blue energy shields shimmered around them. They looked powerful. They looked untouchable. And in front of them, at a distance that felt almost insulting, floated one small human ship. It looked wrong. Its surface was uneven. Some parts were dark gray, others were dull silver. A few plates were clearly taken from alien ships. Symbols from different species were still visible under burn marks. Thick weld lines ran across the hull like scars. Cables and pipes could be seen under half-closed panels. It did not look like a warship. It looked like broken pieces forced together. Inside, the Zyron flagship, the bridge crew stared at the screen. Then someone laughed. "That is their answer?" one officer said. The High Commander of the Zyron Empire leaned forward in his chair. His tall body was wrapped in dark armor. His 4 glowing eyes narrowed slightly. "That," he said slowly, "is what they built from the scrap we gave them." Months ago, after a short but painful border war, humanity had been forced to sign a surrender treaty. They lost shipyards. They lost trade routes. They lost respect. As part of the agreement, the Zyron Empire allowed humans to collect battlefield debris, broken ships, destroyed weapon cores, melted engines, scrap. It was meant as a final insult. "Let them play with trash," the Zyron commander had said at the time. "It will keep them busy." Now that trash floated alone in front of the strongest fleet in the region. On the human ship, the bridge was quiet. No one laughed. Captain Elias Ward stood in the center of the room. He was calm. His hands were behind his back. The bridge lights reflected softly on his uniform. Around him, human officers watched their screens carefully. Energy levels were rising. Reactor chains were stable. External plates were shifting slowly into position. "Distance?" the captain asked. "Enemy fleet holding position," the tactical officer replied. "They are not firing." "Of course they are not," the captain said quietly. Outside, the Zyron fleet remained still. They wanted to show dominance. They wanted the entire council to witness this moment. The alien high commander opened a public channel. "Human vessel," his deep voice echoed across space. "You stand before the Zyron Empire. You were defeated once. Do not embarrass yourselves again." Silence filled the human bridge. Captain Ward looked at the communications officer. "Open channel," he said. The human signal spread across all frequencies. "Zyron Command, Captain," Ward said calmly. "We are grateful." The alien officers looked confused. "For what?" the High Commander asked. "For the materials," the captain replied. The channel closed. On the human ship, warning lights turned yellow. Massive internal rings began to rotate deep inside the hull. Energy moved from one damaged alien core to another. The scrap pieces inside the ship began to glow faintly. On Zyron scanners, strange readings appeared. "Commander," one alien technician said nervously, "their power output is increasing rapidly." "How?" another asked. "That vessel should not support such energy." The High Commander stood. "Raise shields," he ordered. Across the Zyron fleet, blue barriers brightened. On the human ship, external panels unlocked with heavy metallic sounds. Sections of the hull separated. The uneven scrap plates shifted aside like opening ribs. From the center of the ship, a long, narrow structure extended forward. It did not look powerful. It looked thin, fragile, like a metal spine. "Energy chain at 80%, a human engineer reported. "Stability?" Captain Ward asked. "Within human tolerance." The captain allowed a small smile. "Good." Outside, alien ships began charging weapons. "Commander, they are preparing to fire," the tactical officer warned. "Hold," the High Commander said. "They want to scare us." On the council station, diplomats from many species watched with growing tension. The human ship did not move. It did not fire missiles. It did not charge a wide cannon. It simply aimed. Energy chain at full capacity, the engineer said softly. The rotating rings inside the ship aligned perfectly. The scrap metal vibrated. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then, a thin white line flashed across space. It was so fast that many observers thought they imagined it. The beam was not large. It made no dramatic explosion at first. It passed cleanly through the nearest Zyron battleship. Then, through the one behind it. Then, through another. 10 seconds passed. Nothing happened. The High Commander began to laugh again. "Is that all?" he said. Then the first battleship exploded from the inside. A bright blue flash tore through its hull. The ship split apart silently. Seconds later, the second ship exploded. Then the third. A chain of internal reactor failures moved through the front line like falling lights. Within moments, 12 Zyron warships were gone. Not damaged. Gone. The laughter stopped. Shock filled the alien bridge. "How?" someone whispered. "Shields were active," another shouted. On the human ship, the beam emitter cooled slowly. "Front targets neutralized," the tactical officer reported calmly. Captain Ward nodded once. "Realign," he ordered. Outside, panic spread across the Zyron formation. Ships attempted to reposition. Orders were shouted. Energy spikes appeared everywhere. The High Commander stared at the burning wreckage of his front line. "That weapon, now what is it?" he demanded. No one had an answer. The human ship, still scarred and uneven, slowly adjusted its aim again. Its scrap armor glowed faintly from heat. Across open space, the thin, spine-like cannon pointed toward the heart of the Zyron Armada. Inside the Council station, silence filled every chamber. No one was laughing anymore. The human captain watched the enemy fleet carefully. "They underestimated scrap," he said quietly. Behind him, the weapon began charging again, and this time, the entire galaxy was watching. The second charge cycle began. Inside the human ship, the broken alien cores started glowing again. Energy moved through cables that were never meant to work together. Old Zyron power cells connected to cracked Varelian conduits. Melted reactor fragments from 3 different species were chained in a single line. It looked unstable. It looked dangerous. It was both. "Energy chain holding," the chief engineer said, though sweat ran down his face. Temperature rising. Fast. Captain Elias Ward stood steady on the bridge. "Keep it within range," he replied calmly. Outside, the Zyron fleet had stopped moving forward. Their formation was no longer perfect. The front line was gone. In its place floated burning debris and broken metal. The High Commander's 4 glowing eyes stared at the human ship. "Full fleet advance," he ordered sharply. "Overwhelm them." Hundreds of Zyron warships moved at once. The darkness of space filled with blue engine trails. Heavy cannons began charging. Missile bays opened across the alien fleet. They would not laugh again. They would crush the human ship completely. On the human bridge, warning alarms flashed. "Multiple weapons locking on us," the tactical officer reported. "Distance closing." "Fast." Captain Ward nodded. "Activate scatter thrusters." The scrap ship suddenly burst sideways with uneven force. Small engines placed at strange angles fired in short, violent bursts. The movement was not smooth like alien ships. It was rough, unpredictable. Missiles launched from the Zyron cruisers. Bright streaks of light raced toward the human vessel. "Countermeasures deployed," the human defense officer said. Small metal fragments shot out from the scrap hull, releasing clouds of reflective particles. Alien missiles lost tracking and exploded in empty space. But not all of them. One missile struck the outer hull. The human ship shook hard. Metal plates cracked. Sparks flew inside the corridors. "Damage to Section 4, someone shouted. "Seal it," Captain Ward ordered. "Keep charging." Outside, heavy plasma cannons fired. Bright blue blasts crossed the distance and struck the human ship's shields. Unlike alien shields, the human barrier was thin and unstable. It flickered violently with every hit. "They cannot survive direct. Fire for long," the Zyron High Commander said coldly. But then he noticed something strange. The human ship was not running. It was moving in sharp angles, small bursts, sudden stops, almost like it was drawing a pattern. On the human bridge, a young navigation officer whispered, "Pattern alignment complete." Captain Ward gave a small nod. "Good. Lock targets." Deep inside the ship, the rotating rings shifted again. This time, the sound was louder. The vibration moved through the entire hull. The scrap metal armor began to glow faint red. "Energy chain at 95%, the engineer said. "Stability?" the captain asked. "Unstable, but acceptable." The alien fleet was now within heavy engagement range. "Fire everything," the High Commander ordered. A storm of energy exploded from the Zyron Armada. Beams, plasma bolts, missiles, rail projectiles. Space itself seemed to burn. The human ship's shield shattered instantly. Explosions hit the scrap armor directly. Metal tore away. Large pieces of welded plating broke off and spun into space. Inside the bridge, the lights flickered, outer. "Hull failing. Reactor pressure increasing." Captain Ward did not move. "Hold steady," he said. The alien officers watched closely. The human ship was breaking apart. "It is over," one Zyron general said quietly. But then, the scrap ship stopped moving. Completely. Right, in the center of incoming fire. The thin, spine-like cannon extended fully forward, all rotating rings aligned. Energy stopped flowing outward. It compressed inward. For a single second, the human vessel looked dark, powerless. Then a new sound filled the ship, a deep hum. Low, heavy, different from before. On Zyron scanners, warning signals exploded across every screen. "Commander, their energy signature has changed." "How?" the High Commander demanded. The technician's voice shook. "They are not amplifying power. They are compressing it." Before anyone could react, the beam fired again, but this time, it was not a thin line. It was still narrow, but brighter, sharper. It moved across space like a blade. The beam touched the first Zyron cruiser. Its shields flared blue, then turned red, then collapsed inward like crushed glass. The beam continued without slowing. It passed through 3 more ships, 5, 7, where it touched. Reactors destabilized instantly. Ships did not explode right away. They froze, then burst from the inside out. The beam moved in a slow arc. It was cutting. Clean, precise, controlled. Panic spread across the Zyron fleet. Scatter formation, break lines, retreat. But it was too late. The human ship had positioned itself perfectly during its strange movements earlier. The alien ships were lined up, exactly where the humans wanted them. The beam finished its sweep. Silence filled space for 2 heartbeats. Then, 20 warships exploded almost at the same time. Fire lit the darkness like a second sun. Shockwaves pushed debris in every direction. On the council station, alien diplomats stared in disbelief. This was not luck. This was design. Inside the Zyron flagship, fear began to replace anger. That vessel, one officer whispered, it was pretending to be weak. The High Commander clenched his armored hands. "No," he said slowly. "It was learning." On the human bridge, smoke filled the air. Several crew members were injured. Damage reports flooded the screens. The ship had lost 30% of its outer hull, but the weapon was still online, energy reserves at 40%. The engineer said. Captain Ward looked at the tactical display. The once perfect Zyron formation was now chaos. Burning wreckage floated between surviving ships. "Prepare third cycle," he ordered calmly. A shocked officer looked at him. "Sir, the Armada is still larger than us." Captain Ward's eyes remained fixed on the enemy flagship in the distance. "Yes," he said quietly, "but they are afraid now." Outside, the scrap-built ship, scarred, burning, broken, began charging again. And this time, the Zyron Empire was no longer laughing. They were trying to survive. The battlefield no longer looked controlled. It looked broken. Burning pieces of Zyran warships floated between the surviving vessels. Escape pods drifted without direction. Damaged cruisers tried to reform lines, but their perfect formation was gone. The human scrap ship floated in the middle of the chaos. Its hull was cracked. Large metal plates were missing. Sparks flickered along exposed wiring. It looked like it should not still be alive. But it was. Inside the Zyron flagship, the High Commander felt something he had not felt in many cycles: uncertainty. "Status report," he demanded. 32 ships destroyed, 17 heavily damaged. Shield harmonics failing across multiple divisions. The commander's jaw tightened. How can one scrap vessel do this? No one answered. On the human bridge, Captain Elias Ward studied the tactical screen carefully. The alien fleet still outnumbered them. But something had changed. "They are not moving as one anymore," the navigation officer said quietly. "Because they do not trust their shields," Ward replied. That was the key. The Zyron Empire had always depended on shield superiority. Their confidence came from protection. Now that protection had failed in front of the entire galaxy, fear was spreading faster than the beam itself. "Third cycle charging," the engineer reported. "But we cannot sustain many more." "How many?" Ward asked. 2, maybe 3. Shots at this level, that was enough. Outside, the Zyron High Commander made a decision. All heavy carriers move forward, focus fire on their weapon structure, ignore the rest of the hull. He understood now. The spine-like cannon was the heart of the threat. If they destroyed it, the scrap ship would become harmless. Dozens of massive Zyron carriers moved ahead. Their armor was thicker, their weapon arrays were stronger. They began charging concentrated ion lances, weapons designed to pierce planetary shields. On the human bridge, warning signals flashed red. "They are targeting the emitter directly." "Captain." Ward nodded slowly. "Good." The tactical officer looked confused. "Sir?" "Now they are thinking emotionally," Ward said. Outside, the alien carriers fired together. Bright, focused beams struck the human ship's forward structure. The scrap armor melted instantly. Metal ran like liquid into space. The emitter spine shook violently. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. Forward sections collapsing. Emitter housing compromised. Crew members were thrown against walls as the ship trembled. Stability dropping. The engineer shouted. Captain Ward held onto the command rail. "Redirect secondary plating," he ordered. "Seal internal supports." "But sir, that will expose—" "Do it." Large scrap plates from the side of the ship shifted forward mechanically, locking into place around the damaged emitter. It looked rough, uneven, desperate, but it held. The Yao alien commander watched carefully. "Continue fire," he ordered. More ion lances struck. The human ship's hull began tearing apart piece by piece. On the bridge, smoke filled the air again. Energy chain at 60%. Emitter alignment unstable. Captain Ward made a fast decision. Change mode. The engineer's eyes widened. "Sir, that configuration has not been tested. We test it now." Deep inside the ship, the rotating rings stopped spinning. In alignment. Instead, they separated slightly. Energy began moving in pulses instead of a steady stream. Outside, the alien carriers continued firing. They believed victory was seconds away. The scrap ship looked like it was breaking apart. Then, the emitter spine split into 3 thinner segments. Alien scanners blinked in confusion. "What are they doing?" one Zyron officer whispered. The High Commander leaned forward. "Adjust targeting." Before he could finish, 3 narrow beams fired at once, not in a wide sweep, not in a slow cut, but in rapid pulses. Each beam struck a different carrier. Instead of slicing through, the beams drilled, focused on one exact point. The shields of the first carrier flared violently, then collapsed in a tight circle. The beam pushed deeper, straight into the reactor core. The carrier exploded instantly. The second and third carriers followed seconds later. Shock waves pushed surrounding ships off balance. The human ship adjusted again. Pulse after pulse fired in sharp rhythm, each one targeting shield weak points, each one calculated. This was not raw power. This was surgical destruction. Inside, the Zyron flagship panic replaced discipline. They are adapting, a tactical officer shouted. That configuration is new. The High Commander's voice dropped low. They built flexibility into scrap. He finally understood. The humans had not just built a weapon. They had built a system that could change. Every damaged alien component inside that scrap hull gave them options. Different energy types, different outputs, different attack patterns. The scrap was not random, it was diversity. On the human bridge, the engineer looked amazed at his own readings. The pulse mode is more efficient, he said quickly. Less drain per shot. Captain Ward nodded. Continue precision targeting. Focus on command ships. The alien fleet tried to retreat, but retreat required coordination, and coordination required calm. They had neither. More Zyron ships exploded in controlled bursts as pulse beams struck their cores. The battlefield was no longer a battle. It was controlled dismantling. On the council station, alien representatives watched in silence. The message was clear. Humanity did not need perfect technology. They needed opportunity. Inside the Zyron flagship, warning alarms suddenly screamed. Commander! They are locking onto us. The High Commander froze. The tactical display zoomed in. The three split emitter spines of the scrap ship slowly aligned toward the flagship. The damaged human vessel looked like it should fall apart at any second. But it did not. It endured. On the human bridge, Captain Ward stared at the largest target on the screen. The heart of the Armada. Final alignment? He asked. Locked, the tactical officer replied. The engineer swallowed hard. This shot will drain almost everything. Ward's voice was steady. One shot is enough. Outside, the scrap ship glowed as energy compressed one more time. The remaining Zyron ships began scattering wildly, but the flagship was large, slow, and directly in the center. The High Commander stood tall. Prepare impact, he said quietly. In the silence of space, the human weapon began to fire again. The battlefield had turned silent for one long second. Every surviving Zyron ship was watching the same thing. The damaged human scrap vessel. Its hull was torn open in many places. Fire burned along broken edges. Pieces of metal floated away from it slowly. It looked like it could fall apart at any moment. But it did not. The three thin emitter spines pointed directly at the Zyron flagship. Inside the flagship, the High Commander stood tall on the bridge. His officers were shouting around him, shields at maximum. All remaining ships moved to intercept. Commander, we must retreat. He did not retreat. The Zyron Empire had ruled through strength for centuries. Retreat in front of the Council would mean weakness. Weakness would invite rebellion. He could not allow that. Hold position, he ordered. Around the flagship, remaining cruisers rushed forward to form a shield wall. They placed themselves between the scrap ship and their commander. Blue shields overlapped, creating a layered barrier. On the human bridge, Captain Elias Ward watched calmly. They are protecting their pride, he said softly. The tactical officer nodded. Multiple shield layers detected. The engineer spoke with tension in his voice. Energy chain at 90%. This will empty the reserves. Ward did not hesitate. Focus on the shield. Junction points. The navigation officer adjusted targeting slightly. The human weapon was not aimed at the center of the shield wall. It was aimed at where shield fields overlapped. The weakest point. Inside the Zyron fleet, officers began to understand too late. Commander, they are not aiming at us directly. The High Commander's eyes widened slightly. Before he could give another order, the three beams fired together. But this time, they did not sweep. They converged. All three beams struck one exact point in space, the connection between overlapping shield barriers. For a brief second, nothing happened. Then the shield layers began reacting against each other. Energy frequencies clashed. Instead of absorbing the beam, the shields amplified instability between themselves. A violent ripple moved across the defensive wall. One cruiser's shield exploded outward, then the next. The chain reaction spread across the protective line like breaking ice. Cruisers that had not even been hit directly suddenly lost shield control. The beams pierced through the opening. They did not stop. They drilled straight toward the flagship. Inside the human ship, power levels dropped fast. Energy falling. Emitter temperature. Critical! But Captain Ward did not look away. On the Zyron flagship, alarms screamed. Direct impact in 5 seconds. The High Commander stared at the approaching light. For the first time in his long military career, he understood something clearly. The humans had allowed themselves to look weak. They had accepted insult. They had waited. This was not anger. This was planning. The beam struck the flagship's forward shield. The barrier flared bright blue, then red, then white. The shield held for 2 seconds. 3. Then the energy compressed inward. The beam punched through. It entered the hull just below the command deck. Metal vaporized instantly. Internal systems overloaded. Reactor warnings flooded every screen. Core destabilizing. A technician screamed. The High Commander remained standing. Emergency shutdown, he ordered, but the beam had already done its work. The weapon did not explode the flagship immediately. It destabilized its central power network, the heart of the ship. Across the battlefield, surviving Zyron ships froze. They watched their flagship begin to glow from inside. On the human bridge, silence filled the room. The energy reserves dropped to near zero. The emitter spines dimmed. Power exhausted. The engineer whispered. Captain Ward kept watching. Seconds passed. Then, the Zyron flagship split open from within. A silent flash burst outward as its reactor collapsed. The massive warship broke into 2 burning halves. Shock waves pushed nearby. Ships away. Debris scattered in all directions. The pride of the Zyron Empire was gone. Completely. Across the battlefield, something even more important happened. The remaining Zyron ships stopped fighting. Some powered down weapons. Some began retreating. Some simply drifted. The structure of command had been destroyed. Inside the human scrap ship, cheers did not erupt. No. One celebrated. They were too tired, too damaged, too aware of how close they had come to destruction. Captain Ward finally spoke. Status of remaining enemy ships? The tactical officer scanned. They are withdrawing, sir. Ward nodded slowly. Do not pursue. The navigation officer looked surprised. Sir, we can finish them. Ward shook his head. That is not the message. Outside, the broken human ship floated among the burning remains of an armada that once controlled half the sector. The galaxy was watching. From trade stations, from hidden military outposts, from council chambers, and they saw something that would change everything. Humanity had destroyed a superior fleet using scrap, not with numbers, not with perfect ships, but with adaptation. On the council station, a quiet voice spoke among the alien representatives. They built a weapon from what we threw away. Another replied softly, No. They built a weapon from what we failed to understand. Back on the human bridge, Captain Ward looked at the damaged structure around him. Sections of the hull were missing. The emitter spines were cracked. Half the systems were offline, but the ship was alive, and the Zyron Empire was broken. Prepare. Jump to safe coordinates, Ward ordered. Engine charge will take time, the engineer warned. Ward looked at the drifting remains of the once mighty Armada. They will not attack again today, he said. In the distance, the last Zyron ships turned and fled. Not in formation, not with discipline, but in fear. The battlefield slowly grew quiet. Burning wreckage floated like dead stars. The scrap ship, scarred and incomplete, remained at the center. Proof that humiliation can become strength. Proof that being underestimated can become advantage. And across the galaxy, one thought spread faster than light. If this is what humans can build from trash, what would they build if they were truly prepared? The war was not officially over, but something far more important had ended. The laughter. The battlefield was no longer bright with weapons. It was quiet. Burning pieces of metal floated slowly in the dark. Small fires flickered on broken hulls before dying in the vacuum of space. Escape pods drifted without direction. The once proud Zyron Armada was now nothing more than scattered wreckage. At the center of it all floated the human scrap ship. It looked worse than before. Large sections of its armor were gone. One of the emitter spines was cracked down the middle. Entire outer decks were exposed to space. The ship no longer looked like a weapon. It looked like survival. Inside, emergency lights glowed red along the corridors. Repair teams moved quickly. Some crew members carried the injured. Others sealed broken walls with fast-hardening foam. Sparks fell from damaged panels. On the bridge, Captain Elias Ward stood quietly. No one cheered. No one smiled. They were alive. That was enough. Jump engines charging at 30%, the navigation officer reported. External scans? Ward asked. Remaining Zyron ships are retreating at maximum speed. No regrouping detected. Ward nodded once. They are running home. Far away, one damaged Zyron cruiser slowed its retreat. Inside it, officers stared at the tactical recordings again and again. They replayed the moment the shields collapsed, the moment the flagship split apart, the moment fear entered their fleet. This was not brute force, one officer whispered. It was knowledge. And that thought spread among every surviving Zyron captain. Back at the Galactic Council station, emergency meetings had already begun. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in a circular chamber filled with soft light. The room was tense. The Zyron Empire lost its flagship, one diplomat said carefully. And more than half its fleet, another added. To a single human vessel, someone finished. A long silence followed. The humans had not attacked first. They had not invaded. They had responded, and they had done so with something built from discarded debris. An elderly delegate from a distant system spoke slowly. We all gave them scrap, he said. No one answered, because it was true. Many empires had treated humanity as second-class members of the Council. They were seen as emotional, aggressive, too fast to act, not advanced enough. Now that belief was broken. Back inside the human ship, engineers examined the emitter structure. It may never fire again, the chief engineer admitted. The internal cores are burned out. Captain Ward walked along the damaged corridor toward the observation deck. Through the cracked viewing glass, he saw the battlefield one last time. He did not feel pride. He felt responsibility. The message had been sent. Now, the galaxy would respond. A communications officer approached him. Captain, incoming transmission from the Council. Ward returned to the bridge. The screen activated. Instead of threats, there were calm faces. Human representative, one council leader began. The Zyron Empire has requested ceasefire negotiations. A quiet murmur moved across the human. Bridge Ward remained steady. They requested negotiations? He asked. Yes, effective immediately. The shift was clear. Power had changed direction. Inform them, Ward said calmly, that humanity is open to discussion. The channel closed. Several officers looked at their captain in surprise. Sir, after what they did to us? Ward looked at them carefully. This was never about revenge, he said. It was about balance. Outside, the last pieces of the Zyron fleet disappeared into jump space. Across the galaxy, news channels spread the footage. Civilian worlds watched the battle recordings. Military analysts studied the weapon design frame by frame. One truth became impossible to ignore. Humanity had changed the rules. They had proven that technology did not need to be perfect. It needed to be adaptable. It needed to evolve. And humans evolved faster than most species were comfortable with. In the Zyron capital system, panic filled government halls. The Empire had built its control on fear and superiority. Now other conquered systems saw weakness. Small rebellions began quietly. Trade partners delayed agreements, all because of one scrap-built ship. Inside the human vessel, jump engines reached full charge. Coordinates locked, the navigation officer said, "Jump ready." Captain Ward gave one last look at the battlefield. Execute. Stars stretched into white lines as the damaged scrap ship entered faster than light travel. It left behind wreckage. It left behind silence. But it did not leave behind fear. It carried something else forward. Reputation. In the following days, messages flooded into human space. Trade offers, defense treaties, apologies. Species that once ignored humanity now requested alliances. They had seen what happened when humans were underestimated, and they did not wish to repeat the mistake. In a quiet room on Earth, far from the battlefield, leaders reviewed the reports. One advisor spoke softly. The weapon worked. Another replied, yes. But more important, the lesson worked. Humanity had not shown rage. They had shown patience. They had not shown overwhelming numbers. They had shown creativity. And that was more dangerous. Back on the returning scrap ship, the crew finally allowed themselves to rest. The war was not officially declared over, but something had changed permanently. The galaxy no longer laughed at scrap, because now every empire understood a simple truth. If humans could turn debris into a fleet killer, then nothing they touched was harmless. And somewhere deep inside human space, engineers were already studying the battle data, learning, improving, preparing, because humanity never stops building, and the galaxy had just given them new ideas. The human scrap ship arrived back in human space quietly. There was no large celebration waiting for it, no grand fleet, no fireworks, only a small defense group and a repair station orbiting Mars. The damaged vessel moved slowly toward the dock. Its hull was burned and broken. One emitter spine hung at an angle. Large sections were patched during travel just to keep pressure stable. It looked fragile, but every person who saw it understood something important. That ship had faced an Armada, and won. Inside the repair station control room, engineers stared at the incoming data feed from the battle energy readings, shield reactions, enemy movements. They were not cheering, they were studying. On the ship's bridge, Captain Elias Ward finally allowed himself to sit down. For the first time since the battle began, he closed his eyes for a moment. The mission was complete, but the consequences were only beginning. Across the galaxy, reactions continued to spread. The Zyron Empire officially confirmed the destruction of their flagship. A new temporary leader stepped forward. Their public message was controlled and careful. They called the event an unfortunate escalation. They did not call it defeat. But everyone knew. Several smaller systems under Zyron control began asking for independence talks. Some border worlds stopped sending tribute. The Empire could not respond quickly. Half their fleet was gone, and the other half had lost confidence. Fear does not disappear quickly. At the Galactic Council station, emergency policies were rewritten. Human technology was reclassified. Before the battle, humanity was ranked as a middle-level military species. After the battle, they were placed in a new category, adaptive strategic power. It was not about ship size. It was not about numbers. It was about unpredictability. In one private council meeting, a senior delegate spoke clearly. If we push them again, they will not build the same weapon twice. That statement stayed in the room long after the meeting ended. Back on Earth, news of the battle reached ordinary people slowly. Official reports were calm and simple. A defensive engagement resulted in Zyron fleet withdrawal. But leaked footage told a stronger story. People saw the scrap ship. They saw the beam cutting through enemy lines. They saw the flagship split apart. For many humans, it was not about victory, it was about respect. For years, they had been treated as reckless and inferior. Now the galaxy had watched them think, adapt, and survive. Inside the Mars repair station, the scrap ship was slowly pulled into dry dock. Massive robotic arms surrounded it. Scanners moved across its broken hull. Engineers walked through the damaged corridors. One young engineer stopped in front of the burned emitter structure. "It should not have worked," she said quietly. An older engineer smiled slightly. "It worked because it should not have. The scrap weapon had no perfect design. It had no smooth system. It was built from broken parts forced to cooperate. That was its strength. Human scientists began analyzing every second of the battle. They studied the moment the alien shields reacted against each other. They studied how fear changed fleet formation. They studied how emotion affected strategy. The lesson was clear. Technology wins battles. Understanding wins wars. Far away in the Zyron capital, the new acting commander reviewed the battle again in private. He paused at the moment the human ship sent its message. "Thank you for the materials." He understood the meaning now. The humans had not wasted anything, not even humiliation. In the following weeks, the Zyron Empire sent official peace envoys to Earth. Their tone was respectful, careful, different. Captain Ward attended the first meeting. The same alien species that once laughed at scrap now spoke with measured voices. "We seek stability between our peoples," the envoy said. Ward looked at him calmly. "Stability requires mutual respect." There was no anger in his voice, no pride, only certainty, and that was more powerful than threats. Across the galaxy, military academies added a new lesson to their curriculum. Case study, the scrap engagement. The main conclusion was simple. Never assume weakness based on appearance. Never insult a species that adapts quickly, and never give humans access to your technology, even if broken. Years later, the scrap ship itself would never fire again. It was preserved instead, repaired carefully, placed in orbit above Earth as a historical monument, not because it was beautiful, but because it was important. Children would look up at it and learn that strength does not always look perfect. Sometimes it looks broken. Sometimes it looks like failure, but inside that broken shape can exist patience, creativity, and the will to wait for the right moment. The Zyron Empire survived, but it was never the same. It became more cautious, more diplomatic, less arrogant. And every time its leaders considered aggressive expansion, someone would quietly mention one word: scrap. Because that word no longer meant trash. It meant risk. It meant consequences. It meant humanity. And somewhere deep inside human research facilities, new projects had already begun. Not larger fleets, not bigger cannons, but smarter systems, more adaptable designs. Because humanity understood something others were just learning. Victory is not about showing power first. It is about letting others underestimate you long enough to build something unexpected. The galaxy had laughed once. Minutes later, an Armada was gone. They would not laugh again.